Hi everyone, it's William. I hope you're not going to exit your viewing of the video once I tell you that we are into a two-part look at the section of the diary where Dmitri talks about Black Friday and the labor movement in Britain with a threatened general strike, more or less general strike, in April 1915. Okay, so a recap for the previous section of the long diary entry of April 1915. Well, Dmitri talks about how he and Coco were just generally driving around France, kind of aimlessly, just doing a really classic road trip with nothing much in mind. And they on the spur of the moment, decided to go to Vichy. He's not sure exactly why. Maybe to take the waters, although it turned out that most of the springs were closed and the place was gloomy because it was low season and hotels were closed and so on and so forth. And then he ends it by talking about Andre and Boris with some hurt feelings, clearly, because he had at least gotten in touch with Andre, sent him a message. This is Grand Duke Andre, I should say. Sent him a message saying, "I'm in town." And Andre had not responded to that. So, yeah, he ends by saying, who needs them, basically? I'm doing fine without them. Okay, our cast today is two interesting people. One, I don't need to talk about, David Lloyd George, the Prime Minister of Britain at that time, and the other one, I'm just making a note here, is a labor leader and political leader named James Thomas. So Dmitri is doing his best to be au courant with what's going on in current events. Okay, so let's dive in. It turned out to be extremely fortunate that I didn't go to England as I had originally planned, because God only knows what's going on there. And Lloyd George himself admits that England is not only on the brink of ruin, but has already started slowly sliding downhill. There they are experiencing a truly terrible labor crisis which apparently threatens the entire country. Of course, it all started, as it did last year, with a coal miners' strike over the refusal to accept a proposed wage cut. But this miners' strike threatens much more serious consequences for the country than the one last year, because this time the workers have decided to stop running the pumps that work day and night to remove water from the mines. And if the mines are flooded, they won't be usable for a very long time. In addition to the coal crisis, England is threatened by yet another catastrophe, because the Triple Alliance, that famous English labor organization, i.e. the union of the three biggest workers' organizations, the railroad workers, the transport workers, and the coal miners, have also decided to stop working and join their strength on behalf of one of the members, the coal miners. I must give full credit to the government. In moments of national crisis, it acts with amazing speed and energy. One reads every day in the newspapers about various measures being taken by London to counter the impending catastrophe. The first such strong measure was the mobilization of Army and Naval reserves. That made a tremendous impression. And then, just like last year, a call was put out for volunteers to provide transport and reinforce the police. The citizens of England responded to the call with a surprising level of goodwill and willingness. The situation in England is apparently so serious that they have found it necessary to issue a royal manifesto for mobilization, royal decree, I should have said. That's me, not Dmitri. A royal decree for mobilization and the registration of volunteers. Judging from the latest news, the situation has become a little better because Mr. Thomas, the leader of the Railroad Workers Union, has prevented his people from going on strike, which of course has greatly lessened the danger of a general movement of a revolutionary type on the part of the Triple Alliance. But the crisis, so far as the miners are concerned, is far from resolved, and of course that alone is bringing the whole life of England to a standstill. So it's crystal clear here that he wrote this in two parts, because he starts out writing that the other two labor unions had decided to join in and to support the coal miners. But then he comes back a little later, clearly on the same day, with an update saying that, in fact, they have decided not to support, or at least that the railroad workers have decided not to support the coal miners, and in fact, the transport workers would also decide not to jump in. And so the date that he's writing on this on, the 15th of April, was actually in Britain called Black Friday, came to be called Black Friday. And I gather it was called Black Friday not because this general strike started that was disastrous, but because the leaders of the other two big unions that belonged to this Triple Alliance backed out and left the miners hanging and didn't support them. I guess that's why it's called Black Friday. Anyway, the issue primarily, as I understand it, and I have very little information, is that during the war, the mines were put under government control, and the miners received more pay than they had in the past. But that now that the war was over, they were returning to their private owners, and the economic situation was bad, and so there was expected to be a fairly sizable wage cut. And so that was what they were responding to. And, you know, it was apparently, it seems to have been a genuinely economic strike rather than a political one. Anyway, I really don't know about the government action that Dmitri is referring, well, that he describes. I didn't find anything out. I didn't look deeply on that about but, you know, I have no reason, since he was clearly glued to the newspapers that were coming out, you know, I think he probably has fairly accurate information about what the government did to respond, and he approves of it because it's energetic. That's the sort of thing, exactly the sort of thing that really appealed to Dmitri, when people sort of took the bull by the horns and acted energetically. Okay, so who was Thomas? James J.H. Thomas. He was the leader of the Railroad Workers Union, and I discovered him to be a very, very interesting man. He came from an extremely unprivileged background. He was the son of a mother who'd gotten pregnant out of wedlock, big scandal back in that day, and he was raised by a single grandmother, and he pulled himself up by his bootstraps. He went to work when he was 12 years old, and he, you know, climbed the ladder from there to becoming the leader of the railroad union, and a very effective one, very effective. He was successful in leading a wage strike in 1919. He was also an MP in the Labor Party and would rise quite high in the party and have important assignments. And beyond that, he was a friend of George V and of Churchill, who were both very fond of him. And so you can kind of see the trajectory here. You can kind of see where this is going. His son ended up being a conservative MP and a stockbroker. And J.H. himself was involved in a scandal in which, an insider trading scandal in which apparently he was providing inside information to his son and to another wealthy man in the financial field. But anyway, of course, Dmitri, I don't know what he knew about Thomas, and if he knew more, he didn't jot it down in his diary. Okay, so very interesting. And Dmitri, actually, he mentions the strike the previous year, and that had been a great source of anxiety to him in 1920. If I recall correctly, he had been in England at the time, and he didn't know if it was going to interfere with his ability to go and join Maria in France. He didn't go to France because of the strike. He'd already planned to, but he, with the transportation workers, I think also involved, he didn't know how much that was going to affect him, but it ended up being fine. So what do we have next time? In part 2 of this little section on Black Friday, things are going to get quite personal. Dmitri's going to tell us why, even though he's in France, as I said before, he was just across the boards interested in labor unions and strikes. But there was a very personal element to this, and he's going to talk about that, and in the way that it was personal for the Russian emigre community in general, and for him in particular. And it's very, very interesting stuff. At least I find it so. So do come back for that. I hope you will, and I'll see you next time. Bye.